Hi. Hello everybody. My name is Deborah Jacobi. Some of you may know me in Sfat, if that's where you are. I have written 2 books, The Intimate Act of Eating and The Moral Act of Eating, both of which are available in the Jewish bookstores. As you see, they're about eating, my favorite topic. So one of the issues about eating is that we seem to have a very significant evil inclination to want to eat all the time. And when we look back in our history, we can see actually from King Manasseh up to 1,000 years after we came out of Egypt, where we had idolatry, we worshipped a golden calf, even before we got the Torah, which was amazing after all the miracles that God did for us. But on the other hand, we did not yet have the Torah. We didn't know yet that it was an Avera. But after we got the Torah, we still were worshipping idols up until we came out of Babylon. And King Manasseh of Judah, who was the monarch that reigned for 55 years from 697 to 642 BCE, was one of the major components of this king who encouraged the klal to worship idols. And he had a huge Yetzer Hara, a huge evil inclination to worship these idols. And Ravi Ashi, who was a very big sage who lived many years beforehand, came to Rav Manasseh in a dream, to King Manasseh, and he said to him, they had a halachic discussion, and actually King Manasseh was found to have more knowledge of the Torah than even Ravi Ashi. And Ravi Ashi asked him, why with all your wisdom do you worship idols? And King Manasseh responded, if you had been there, you would have worshipped idols too. You would have lifted the hems of your robes to run behind me to worship idols. And that's from Sanhedrin 10:26. Sanhedrin 10:26. For generations, we were idol worshippers until Hashem took away our Yetzer Hara for idols. Now, I remember being in school in seminary a few years ago when I was a little younger, and hearing about Yidden that worshipped idols. And I sat there and I thought, but I wouldn't have done that. I know I wouldn't have worshipped idols, right? Any more than when I see Adam and Chava not waiting 2 or 3 hours to eat before they were permitted to eat from the tree of knowledge. When I heard that, I also thought, well, I would have waited. I mean, I wait 6 hours between meat and milk. So for sure, I would have waited 2 or 3 hours before eating from the tree of knowledge. But we have to understand the impact of the evil inclination. And if Hashem took away that evil inclination for idols, we today would still all be worshipping idols. So here we see 2 things. We see how the evil inclination runs us, and we see that we need help from Hashem. Very, very significant. If Hashem doesn't, on some level, lessen our desires in a certain direction, then we really do have a hard time battling them. And the test seems overwhelmingly challenging. So we also have an evil inclination for sex. Sexuality is a very big deal, right? And it has been since time began. And sexuality, the evil inclination could not be taken away from sexuality, else we would not procreate. But how powerful is the urge to have sex as opposed to the urge to eat? First of all, we have to eat to survive, so we have a very strong desire to eat. Sexuality, there are many people walking around who just don't have sex for many years at a time. So is it because they have a lesser evil inclination? Or is it simply because sexuality in and of itself is not today the biggest Yetzer Hara, evil inclination? So if we look back in our history, even to the 60s and 70s, we see modern day women looking very attractive, looking slim, dressing very well, and very focused on attracting the opposite sex. And the sexual revolution of that era was free love, right? People were having sex outside of marriage openly for the very first time. And they were having multiple partners. They weren't just staying married. They were even in married relationships, permitting each other to have sexual relationships outside of marriage. Of course, not in the frum world. I'm not talking about religious people, but in general, in the secular world, that was what was going on. Many years later, more recently on the college campuses, they came up with this, what they thought was a new ideology of friends without borders, which meant you could meet somebody the first night and ask them if they just wanted to go to bed, right? And it faded. You don't hear so much about it anymore. It didn't seem to be as powerful as the sexual revolution in the 70s. And if we look on the streets today, we don't see women dressed to attract men so much as we see overweight women who are struggling with food or who are opting to eat over their desire to be in a relationship or to attract men in the way that previous women in generations did. And we see in the Torah also that the copper mirrors, when the women went to attract their men to continue procreating, as well as because they wanted to have a relationship still, they got out their copper mirrors and they beautified themselves. But we see less and less of that going on in this generation. In fact, if we see anything at all, we see women who despise men, who are angry at men, who want to be equal to men, who dress very masculinely, who want to be as powerful as men in the workforce. And this imbalance in the relationship between men and women is extremely significant, because the evil inclination has to go somewhere. And if it's not going into sexuality, then it will go somewhere else. And maybe what we're seeing today is a greater evil inclination for eating than we've ever seen in any generation previously. So we are going to look at that much more carefully in my talk, which will continue. See you soon.